Merry Christmas, everyone. If you live in an English speaking country like me, you've no doubt heard the song about roasting chestnuts on an open fire dozens of times every Christmas season. But I've always found that song weird because I have never heard of roasting chestnuts on an open fire outside of that song. And the song makes it sound like a great tradition. And, as it turns out, at that time it was a great American tradition. But what happened to those chestnuts? And what happened to that tradition? Imagine you woke up tomorrow and all the maple trees had been wiped off the face of the earth. The feeling you get would be comparable to people living in the early 20th century who witnessed the destruction of the American chestnut by the hands of a fungal infection that spread rapidly and relentlessly. The chestnut tree was once an iconic fixture of the American landscape. Today we will learn about their biology, their history, and ultimately their demise, and the efforts of people today to bring them back. American chestnuts were once one of the most common trees in America. At their peak, there was over 1 billion chestnut trees in this country. Chestnut trees were God's gift to Appalachia. The chestnut tree covered the entire range of the Appalachian Mountains and a little bit out of their borders. The tree was once called the Sequoia of the East because of its large size. It grew to be over 125 feet tall and over 10 feet wide, and 16 in some cases. You can recognize the chestnut tree by its dense foliage and its distinctive pointed leaves. The defining trait of a chestnut tree, however, is its chestnuts. The American chestnuts were very sweet and popular. They were a primary food source for many animals in the region, and a strong backbone of the economy of Appalachia. American chestnuts grew thousands of nuts in pods called burrs. The nuts from these pods would rain down like manna from heaven during the fall and provide the locals with something to eat and also to sell to port cities and towns. Children would gleefully pick up handfuls of chestnuts and stuff them into their shirt so they could roast them for dinner. There were many people who lived on self-sustaining farms who only gained money by collecting chestnuts and selling them to the cities. Chestnuts were so plentiful, in fact, that during the fall, farmers would let their pigs out to feast on the nuts so they wouldn't have to spend money on feed, and then just retrieve them at the end of the season. Chestnut wood was also very useful due to its rot resistance. The reason chestnut wood was so rot resistant was because it was high in tannic acid. People would scrape the tannic acid out of the bark so they could tan leather. Not only were chestnut trees extremely rot resistant, they could also grow 50% faster than any normal hardwood. And also, when you chopped one down, it would grow a bunch of shoots out of its roots, which would turn into many more chestnut trees. This tree was perfect. Chestnut wood was called a crib to coffin wood because you would use it throughout your entire life. I bet the people in Appalachia would have thought it unimaginable that their godsend would disappear within one generation. But that's exactly what happened when the Blight came. The chestnut blight was brought to America by Scottish botanist Robert Fortune, who imported the first Japanese chestnuts to America. Before Robert Fortune accidentally imported the chestnut blight to America, he was also responsible for an act of British espionage which reduced China's monopoly on the tea leaf industry and allowed the British East India Company to grow tea leaves. This act of espionage caused the Chinese economy to collapse and was part of their century of humiliation. Robert Fortune's actions directly contributed to the downfall of Imperial China and the rise of Communist China. It wasn't until 24 years after Robert Fortune's death in 1904 did botanists discover that the chestnut blight had spread from Japanese chestnuts that he imported to the American native chestnut trees. The American chestnut, despite being a hardy, rot-resistant tree that could live up to 800 years, had no natural defenses against the blight. It is hard to understate the economic and environmental devastation wrought by the chestnut blight. Appalachia to this day is one of the poorest regions in the United States, and animals like the passenger pigeon have left us forever. The chestnut blight, scientific name Cyrorectria parasitica, grows deep within the wood of a chestnut tree, where it then grows very long perithecial necks which burst out of the bark in order to release spores. Scientists trying to protect the European chestnut from the same blight that destroyed the American one discovered a double-stranded RNA virus which targets the disease. Efforts to propagate the same virus in America have completely failed, however. Others have turned to genetic engineering and transplanted a wheat gene into the American chestnut to hopefully make it immune to the fungal disease. This tree, dubbed Darling 58, has proven to also be a complete failure, as scientists who edited the genome accidentally deleted genes that were necessary for the tree's survival in order to insert the wheat gene. Many people believe that breeding chestnut trees to create natural immunity is the right option. Many have suggested breeding the American chestnut with the Chinese chestnut, but this would create a problem as it wouldn't be a pure chestnut tree. This hybrid tree wouldn't grow nearly as big as an American chestnut or serve the same purpose in the environment, so it would really be replacing one tree with another instead of bringing back the old chestnut tree. Others have suggested breeding the few remaining American chestnuts in the wild together to create a more naturally stronger chestnut. This would be the purest way to bring back the American chestnut, but it is extremely difficult and can take many, many decades. I personally believe that the American chestnut will inevitably come back, even if it isn't in the near future. And I don't support meddling with the genome, as that can have disastrous consequences, unforeseen consequences. I wonder if in this next life, Robert Fortune found out what he had done. That he had destroyed something as American as apple pie, and that generations would never know what it was like. He's probably burning in hell anyway. Anyway, that's all for today. God bless you, and see you again next time.